It's March 9th, 2017. I'm Sue Cohen with the San Marcos Heritage Association, and I have the distinct pleasure and honor of interviewing three folks, three Bisms born in San Marcos, born in 1934, all three. And on the left, we have Nancy Blackwell Scott, and in the middle, we have Linda Cliett Gilcrease, and then our gentleman, Tom Buckner. Tell me a little bit, where were you born, Nancy?
Well, actually, I was not a Bism. I was born on the Blackwell Ranch between Mountain City and Kyle, but I came to San Marcos when I was 5 years old, and I've never left San Marcos initially. So I really think I should be grandfathered and considered a Bism.
How about you, Linda?
Well, I was born at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hospital on Veramendi Street, which actually is across the street from Tom Buckner's house.
Yeah, that's right.
It's no longer a hospital. I don't know what it is now.
The McCoys have a beautiful home there.
It burned down a
Yes.
few years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how about you, Tom?
Well, I was born in San Marcos, and I don't know if I was born in that hospital or not, even though I lived just 2 houses from it.
You lived on Veramendi?
And yeah, 323 Veramendi Street, and in San Marcos, and I was born on May the 15th there, in 34.
So y'all known each other your entire life. You came at 5 years old. So where did y'all go to elementary school? Tell me about elementary school.
Campus Elementary, where Evans Auditorium is now. And we really, most of those who graduated in 1952 started to school either in nursery or the first grade at camps. And we went from the first grade through the sixth grade at Campus Elementary. So we knew each other well. The teachers at that time, most of them seated in alphabetical order, so we knew who was on the right and the left.
So you had Blackwell, Buckner, and Cliett. Y'all all sat together also.
Pretty close. There was Bill Backus in between there.
Yeah, it was. Well, I went to nursery school first. Ms. Evans was our teacher. And that was for 4-year-olds in Campus Elementary School, and then went to kindergarten, where we picked up most people, and that is Evans. Later in life, after we got our schools in San Marcos, that became Evans Auditorium. But when I grew up, I went to elementary school at Evans, what's now Evans Auditorium.
Where was your family home?
On Harvey Street, about 2 blocks from the square. And I'm getting ahead of myself.
Did you walk to school? No, that's good. You're
did.
good.
What's strange is I keep thinking, how on earth at lunch we'd walk home to have lunch, because our main meal was noon usually. So I'd walk home for lunch and walk back afterwards.
Did you walk with your brothers or your friend? You have 3 brothers?
I have 3 brothers, 2 brothers, and they're younger than I. We're 5 years apart, so they're more like cousins than they are brothers and sisters.
Where was your family home, Nancy?
On Wilson Street, and there were lots of kids in that neighborhood, and we had a wonderful time.
So you walked home for lunch too?
No, I did not. I took my lunch. And every once in a while I'd trade lunches with someone else, and my mother would say, "Why did you do that?"
What did your mother put the lunch in? What did your lunch pail look like?
It was a paper sack back those days. We didn't have all these cute little lunch pails.
How about you, Tom? What did you do?
Well, we as Eve said, we all started. I started in kindergarten. The class before us, if they went to Southwest Texas State Teachers College and got a master's degree there, they would have gone 13, 4. They would have gone 19 years, all in the same school buildings.
Which was really a college.
It was Southwest Texas State Teachers College.
Because our school district owned no buildings.
Right. Well, they did, but there was a black school and a Hispanic school, and those were owned. And the public school, high school, had been well, it was torn down while we're still in school. It was too unsafe to go to school there. And it had been closed for years when we started in kindergarten, so probably back in the 30s sometime.
Where was that located?
It was located where Pennington's funeral home is now.
Because somebody said that it burned also.
It did. It burned down. Somebody probably said it. I don't know. But
it wasn't you.
No, it wasn't me.
What are some of the things that y'all remember doing as young kids in San Marcos?
We had a wonderful open field area all around us, and the Waldrop family owned the big white two-story with the 5 pillars that is still at 1241 West San Antonio Street. After the Waldrops, that was Superintendent Fred Catterley's home. And then many years later, John and Beth Morissette moved to San Marcos, and that was their home. But all of that was open field when we were growing up. So we had all this wonderful area where the local kids played cowboys and Indians and ran all over the place, hide and seek, and we had our play rifles, and I had my 6-shooters, and the girls on the corner did too. And we just had a wonderful time running and playing. And the girls on the corner had a big tree house in Chunberry tree at the back of their house. So when we get hot and tired and decide we want to rest, we'd go over to their house and get a drink of water out of the water hydrant. And sometimes in the afternoon, their mom might have some Kool-Aid for us. And we get up in the tree house and play and take a little nap. And then first thing you know, we were out and going again. We didn't have all these things. We just made up on our own games and just, had a wonderful time. And then there were some times when all we did was just lay back in the grass in our yard and looked at the beautiful blue sky and all those fluffy clouds and just had all these wonderful imaginations about what they were and maybe what we were going to be when we grew up. We just had a good time.
But we all the girls had slingshots.
Yes.
I mean it was we had to.
And what did you do with the slingshots? Why did you have to?
We shot. At my house, across the street was David Daly and John DeStagger, and so
that's why you needed the slingshot.
Yeah. And at night, a lot of times we'd go sit out in the yard with our families, and catch lightning bugs.
Uh-huh.
That was a big deal to catch the lightning bugs.
Sure was.
So it was.
We living where I did. You mentioned slingshots. One of our good classmates, one of my best friends in our class, it was a guy named Laverne Schaefer, and Laverne lived back in the woods behind our house, and he could hit anything with his. They call them slingshots now. And Laverne was a true woodsman. He usually had a baby squirrels in his shirt pocket. I remember he always had something. He'd have a coon, or he didn't have any skunks in his house, but he'd have pets like that. And we'd go hunting. We'd go hunting up there when I guess we were probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 years old, and explore around in what we call the woods. Our backyard essentially was woods and Wonder Cave. It was just right up the hill behind our house, and so that was an interesting place to grow up. And
Was it a commercial venture back
Oh,
then?
yes, it was, and it had been for a number of years, I think. But it was I'm trying to think of the name of the family that ran that. Roland, the Roland family ran it, and they had a son named Rugel, and Rugel was he was a little off mentally, and he would come down and play with us. He was about 4 or 5 years older than us guys that lived down the hill from him, but he'd come down and play cowboys and Indians with us and stuff, and one of his talents was carving. He could carve just all sorts of things out of just pieces of wood that he'd pick up, and that was his talent.
So then y'all went to y'all graduated from high school in 1952.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about those years, the things y'all did for fun, and those were some idyllic times. The war had ended. Tell me about life in San Marcos in those years.
Well, San Marcos, I always think of San Marcos as the river, and the river was a focus of most of us. As soon as we could, we'd go swimming in the summer, the weather permitting, and way back when, maybe before we were born, there was, let's see, what's the name of the swimming pool, Riverside swimming pool now?
Sewell Park.
Oh, Sewell. There was a Dr. Sewell up at the college, and he went swimming every January the 1st. And I remember seeing a picture of him leading his class to go swimming in the snow in the San Marcos River up where Sewell Park is today. So
They still do that.
they still do it. Okay, well, good.
Well, the water is so warm.
Yeah, it's the same temperature.
And you girls remember playing in the river too?
I remember more down at Revista at the falls.
Yeah.
And I remember a big old bathhouse down there that we used to have picnics and parties, school parties and birthday
Oh, yeah.
parties and that sort of thing.
Trolley.
But
You
yes.
remember that trolley?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
Fun
there
was
a,
that.
a trolley off a tree or a train track or something, and everybody, if you had the nerve, we'd get on that
But
thing.
we'd grown up swimming in the river. People didn't
Yeah.
have swimming pools then like they do today.
That's right.
So it was just really a...
And in
And
San Marcos, as small as it was, as I recall, and y'all could check the population back then, but it was about 6,000 or 7,000, as I recall, back in those days. And but we had divisions in our town. There was the downtown guys, and there's one of the big boys in school. He was about 3 years ahead of us, I guess. Was a fellow named Edwin Cooper. His dad had a bakery, and on the way, when we went to school up on the hill, we'd come down at lunch. We'd walk, my cousin and I, Bud Buckner. We would walk down the hill to the newspaper office where our dad and uncle were, and go home for lunch, and then he'd drive us back and drive us up the hill but we'd walk up and down the hill, and every time we walked down the hill or up, we'd have to go by Cooper's Bakery, and it was really hard to not stop there and get something to eat. He had the best donuts, as I recall it, remember.
What kind of work did your dad do?
Well, he was a part owner of the San Marcos Record, and he was the back shop guy. He was the printer.
Where was the record located back then?
It was located on the back side of Palace Theater, on the corner of what is it, LBJ? LBJ and Hutchison Street. And at one time it was a Ford Motor Company, way back when. And that was not the first place that the San Marcos record was, the first place it was located where Western Auto used to be, next to J.C. Penney's, just off the square there. And they outgrew that. They needed more room for the presses in the back, and so they moved into that. One story my dad tells about when they moved, they had to move all the presses down the sidewalks and across the street, and then down the sidewalk again and into the other new building, not the new building, but the one that they were leasing. And Dad said that they were rolling them on pipes, and all of the neighbor businessmen came to help, and so there was a crowd of men pushing the presses on those pipes, and the Dad looked down, and the guy that was helped by him, the pipe had rolled up on his shoe about halfway up his shoe, and Dad said, "Stop, stop." And the guy said, "That's all right. These shoes are way too big for me, and they hadn't reached my toe yet." But that's just some memories of that little.
So you were a downtown kid, and Linda, your dad had the hardware store right down the street. You were a downtown kid.
Well, I was not a downtown kid. I was a Southtown kid. Over toward Westover.
West End.
Yeah,
we were West End kids.
What was a downtown kid?
Well, the guys that lived down there.
Jimmy Pappas.
Above the buildings.
Well, for instance, John Young Stevenson was president of our senior class. No, he was president of the student council, I believe. But anyway, he lived in a boarding house right next door to our newspaper upstairs, and so he and I were real good friends. And Jimmy Pappas, he lived above Pappas Cafe, where the Matt Kyle, is that his name? Law office is over on that side of the square.
Next to that old theater.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about that cafe. What did your parents do?
My dad had a little repair shop at home, and my mother was a receptionist at Jim Smith Cleaners, and then in later years she had her own little sewing shop at home. And so various things around town. One of the things I think about when we were kids, we had so much fun. Jane and Ross King lived down the street on Porter. It's MLK now, but it was Porter then. And they had a donkey, and they had a homemade cart. And so on those days that we weren't playing cowboys and Indians, we might be down there harnessing that donkey to the cart. And then we'd head toward Dunbar, because all of that was open field all the way down to Purgatory. And so we would do our little thing with the cart until the donkey got tired and he started balking. We decided we better go home because we might have to pull that cart, So, but our territory was kind of over to Endicott and down to Purgatory and the feeder streets, Mitchell and South Johnson and Wilson. We could play all up and down those streets. And then on
and there was not a limit as to the space that we went.
No, because everybody knew their neighbors and knew whose kids belonged to who, and and I know with my dad, when it was time to come home, and while I wasn't there, I could depend on hearing him whistle. And then some other folks had a bell that they rang when it was time to come home. And, you didn't have all this short order business in food service with Mom. She cooked 1, 2, or 3 meals, and you better be there at that time. And that was so special because it really, really was family time where you talked to each other. You didn't have these disturbances or these distractions like cell phones and
television,
laptops, TV, all of that. If you had a radio, that was back in the Depression, so you were fortunate if you had a radio, And I used to listen to the radio, loved the music. And then up on West San Antonio Street, about 1300 block again, there was a little one-room store, ABC Dean owned that store. And he had a few items, but he always had penny candy, nickel candy, bubble gum, and Big Red, and Orange Crush, and popsicles. And we would, if we had some money, we'd go up there and get something and sit on the curb and watch all the squirrels and birds up and down the tree across the way and people passing by. So that was our territory was sort of San Antonio to Endicott to Purgatory. We didn't cross Purgatory. We could go down there all up and down the way, but we didn't cross Purgatory.
How did you get money? Did you have chores that you did?
Well, you had
chores.
chores at home. The next thing I wanted to tell you about was our fun times on Saturday. We couldn't wait till Saturday because
Now, this was before we were in high school.
yeah, oh yeah,
This
yeah.
is in junior
This
high.
is when we were in grade school, as a matter of fact. And if you did your chores and behaved yourself and you got an allowance, and then there was Mickey Mouse on Saturday. So all the kids would group up and walk to town and meet the town kids, and those from the hill would
For a
come
nickel.
down, and it was where the LBJ Museum is now. That was the
Now, I thought it was over there. The Palace Theater was over there by the record.
It was.
it was, but that was later on.
There were somebody said there were 3 theaters and they were
Yes.
segregated.
Well, no.
No.
I don't remember this.
I don't remember them being segregated.
I don't remember that.
Mm-mm.
They
Y'all
could've- they
school
could've
was
been-
segregated.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we were not aware of that.
No, I mean we
all
had
you
friends.
knew.
We had friends in all of the different races and stuff in
Right.
town, and played with them and stuff. And I never did even think of them having separate schools.
No.
Because that running area you described is in the Dunbar neighborhood and
Right.
y'all played
Yeah.
together.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But you got to go to the movies for a nickel.
Yeah. Well,
If you go Saturday morning, but Saturday afternoon it was 9 cents.
well, to lure you in on morning, a nickel would get you into the movie, give you a comic book that had the cover had been half torn off so that the price wouldn't show, and I think that was. Could you get you'd have a dime to get a Big Moon or something like that, or Big
Or
Tootsie
pickle.
Roll.
What'd you do after the movie?
Oh,
Sometimes we would go to the Finney house and sit for hours playing jacks on the front porch or in the living room floor, or maybe to Linda's house. Her mom was our brownie scout leader
Yeah.
somewhere during that time, and and the guys were out kicking the cans and just doing their own thing. But
They were fun times. Nell Hilting had a jalopy that was
yes,
she painted it purple, and that was a fun to have her go hoga, and she'd do that when she took any of us for a ride. Oh, it was.
did some of your other participants in this may have told you about the letter jackets that San Marcos High School. When we were in school, our letter jacket had an H on it instead of an SM. And there's a reason for that, because back and when our dads went to school here, there was 3 high schools. There was the public school, there was the academy, and there was the normal high school up at the college. And so the normal high school had an N on their letter jacket. The academy, of course, had A. And so the public high school had H. And that was for several years after we graduated. I don't know when they changed to SM, but it's probably in the 60s or 70s, sometime in there.
What did the H stand for?
High school,
Oh.
of course.
And where was your high school?
Well, it was up there in the and it was what was the education building at the college.
So
up
y'all
on the
went
hill.
all
hill.
4 years.
No, the last
No.
year they built a school for us, and that became later it became Lamar Middle School or junior or high, whatever, elementary, yeah. But we
graduated from the 6th grade in the campus elementary, went directly across the street to the education building,
yeah,
and went the 7th through the 11th.
No, 12.
There.
No,
Oh, that's
And
right.
then
You
yeah.
were the first graduating class in the brand new high
Yeah,
school.
right.
but the gym wasn't finished.
No, it wasn't completed yet.
The auditorium was, but not the gym.
What did y'all do without a
Now
gym?
Tommy played
Well,
basketball.
all of our sports were in the facilities of the college. We practiced and played in the old men's gym at the college. There was basketball courts on both 2 floors, and we would practice on the smaller court downstairs as a rule. But sometimes we get to go upstairs when the Bobcats weren't practicing. And our football games and dressing room were out at Evans Field.
Did you play football too?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you could
Yeah.
walk and chew gum at the same time, we had such a small class, you almost had to do that.
He was one of the captains.
But and our track was out there at Evans Field, and not only did, especially in track, the Bobcats coach was Coach Strand. They pronounce, people that don't know him now pronounce it Strahan now, but it was Coach Strand. And he would not only coach the college team, but he would coach us too. And he was an excellent track coach. He was
wonderful.
really, really good. We called him Old Stoneface.
What kind of activities were you ladies involved in high school?
choir,
Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't have girls' athletics back in that day.
Not a whole lot. There was
volleyball.
some volleyball.
Oh, they did?
And there was some basketball, but not to the extent that it is now, you know.
But we were in the choir, or
They're in the band.
yeah, and football players could play in the band.
Yeah.
They just didn't play during the football season
No, we didn't.
because they were playing football.
How many were in your graduating class of 1952? Do you remember?
I think it's 55. Does that sound right?
I thought it was 63.
Yeah, I counted in our annual, our old annual. It was
Okay.
63.
What did you count?
63.
63. Okay.
Good. Well, then we talk about the people that are in Wimberley came
Yeah,
into
right, yeah.
our high school,
Yeah.
and of course the main ones I remember are Don and Yvonne Williams.
J.C. Roberts.
You know,
J.C.
we had
Roberts.
some great friends come down from Wimberley to go to junior high and high school with us, and we. Let's see. I had a thought I was going to say, and I can't remember it now. I'll think of it in a minute.
That's what happens when you get
Oh.
to be.
Do y'all still
yeah.
have reunions? Do y'all keep up with your class?
Every month.
Really?
This is our March reunion. We had lunch with 3 other of our classmates before we came over here.
The last 2 years, we didn't have a reunion until I think like our 40th and then 50th, and then
Yeah.
we skipped, and then and most of our class members were still living in good health until those later ones, and so just a few, I guess it was about 4 years ago, we had lost so many of our groups, so someone said, okay, let's have it every year. And the ones that live around here that kind of get things together said, about that. And then we came up with this idea to get everybody's birthday. And so the ones that live close enough, if they have a birthday, and we've done this for 2 years, every month, we have a birthday bash. And those that don't live here, we send them cards, and we eat enough for them. So,
and the birthday person gets to choose
Yeah.
where we go eat.
Yeah, I'm in May, and I've already chosen the barbecue place out on Hunter Road out there. Our class was the smallest. I think probably all of the classes preceding us for probably at least 10 years, and then all of them after us were much larger than our class. We were depression babies, and you're holding a paper there that tells the stories of those depression babies, but we put that together several years ago when they had the anniversary of the Great Depression. But we grew up, and all of us, I think, were poor, but we didn't know it. And in telling those stories, in my story, I remember a Christmas. I must have been 4 or 5 years old, maybe 6, and I had a toy, and it was a little truck, and I played with that truck all the time, and it disappeared. And it must have disappeared now. Or looking back, it's probably in November. And I looked everywhere for my truck, and Dad went out in the woods behind our house and cut down a cedar tree for our Christmas tree. And Christmas morning, I went in to see if Santa Claus had brought any store toys, and there was my truck. Dad had sanded and painted it, and I think that was the best Christmas gift I ever got.
Wow.
Sure was.
But our mothers were great cooks. I mean, looking back, I'm wondering how on earth my mother came up with what she came up with.
Did they have gardens? Did they have chickens? Tell me about how you got your groceries, your milk, and stuff like that.
My daddy was manager of William Cameron Company, and he had a cow down there. And
At the lumber yard?
at the lumber yard, he had a cow.
I didn't know that.
And so, of course, we had fresh milk. And I guess he must have had, because we had fresh eggs, so I guess he had chickens down there too.
Well, maybe your neighbors had chickens.
It could be. But we had ice cream, from the cream, that fresh cream. Oh, it was good.
You made ice cream?
Of
Oh,
course.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. But you made it with a crank. We
Yeah.
didn't have the electric.
Yeah.
And you had to go to the ice company to get the ice?
Correct.
Yeah.
and then we had to take turns sitting on the freezer while it was being cranked
That's right. That's right. With lots of newspapers on top.
to hold it in place.
Did your mom have a garden for vegetables, or?
Nancy's mothers did.
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Yes.
We did not.
Yeah.
We lived downtown.
In fact, the hospital where across the street from our house was a huge lot, empty lot in front of the hospital. And during World War II, the city decided to make that a victory garden. And so they put a water faucet right out in the middle of it. And of course, when the war was over, it grew up and was grass again. And that's where we played and flew kites and would run across the lot and hit that faucet with our bare foot and break our toes. But that was it was we also had our own garden out in the back, and our neighbor Edwin Smith had a cow and chickens, and he would sell us milk and eggs. And our coach, Claude Evans, Lanky Evans, when we were in junior high school, he when practice was over, he'd say, "You guys hurry up and get dressed. Says I got to go milk the cow and feed the chickens and slop the hogs." and he sold his milk all over town. He had an old flatbed truck, and we'd see him driving all over town delivering milk every day.
Wow.
After school was out.
So your mom made a big supper. You came home for lunch and then you had supper every night?
Yeah, but it was not a big supper.
So lunch was the meal.
Lunch was the big meal.
And Sunday lunch.
It was dinner and
Yeah.
supper.
Yeah, dinner and supper. We didn't have dinner at
Oh.
night.
Yeah.
But at our house, all of them were big.
Yeah. Yeah.
We ate very well.
We did. We didn't have anything. I don't know how my mother came up with what she came up with. She'd make up stuff all the time. And it was really,
All from scratch.
of course.
I want to read what one of our classmates wrote about eating in the Depression. This is from our classmate Lou Ann Bragg. She wrote, Uncle Jimmy had a garden and we never went without fresh vegetables, but we ate a lot of squirrel, rabbit, fish, dove, quail, and venison. That's why Dad had all those meat coupons to trade. We quit churning milk to make butter and bought that white stuff with the yellow capsule you squeezed into the white until it looked like butter. That was oleo. Remember the oleo? And
Forgotten.
I don't remember thinking we were poor, but I sure wore my share of feed sack dresses and loved summertime when I could go without shoes in order to save them for school.
What did y'all wear to school? What did your clothes look like back then?
Feed sacks.
Yeah,
Well,
I had feed sack dresses.
Mother made
My
all
mother
mine,
could
yeah.
make-
I had shirts and underbreeches made out of feed sacks.
So your clothes were all made by your moms.
Yeah.
yeah,
of
for the most
course.
part.
Yeah.
And girls only wore dresses.
We only wore dresses.
Yeah.
And I can remember having two pair of shoes, a pair of school shoes and Sunday shoes.
Sunday school.
And I was lucky if I had two pair of shoes.
Linda, do I remember correctly when we went to college, the college girls had to wear dresses, wasn't that
Yes.
a requirement? They couldn't wear shorts or
That is
blue
correct.
jeans and stuff? Yeah.
That is correct.
This was back in the 50s.
Yes. I remember one of our classmates, and it was in a homemaking class. We were supposed to wear dresses all the time. And she was the first one that broke the rules. She lived out on a ranch on Hugo Road, and she wore jeans to school.
What happened?
She got in trouble there,
Yeah.
but it wasn't long till you start seeing people.
Now,
So the rule had been broken and an exception made, and so that pretty well took
Now,
care
you
of it.
mentioned the lady with the jalopy. Did any of y'all have a car in high school?
oh no.
Well, yeah, I did when I was a senior. I had an old 39 Ford that the brakes didn't work, but there were several of us that had cars, but it was always full because all of our classmates that didn't have cars needed rides and stuff, and we'd pack 8 or 10 people in there. It seemed like.
And we got our driver's license at 14.
Yes.
And I mean, it was a given.
Yeah.
And you could go to work at 14. The merchants could hire you at 14.
Did you have a part-time job?
My first experience in the workforce was at Buccaneers, and my assignment was the thread counter. I had to keep all those colors in order and separated and keep everything dusted, and we'd work all Saturday. Then we'd go down to Hilburn's, which is where Bubba had his food shop for so long, and have a wonderful chicken salad sandwich. And then we'd go down to the Palace and watch our favorite Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly or whatever movie was on at the Palace at that
So you only worked on Saturday?
on Saturday. That was it,
Now,
to start
the
with.
principal had no problems with discipline in school back then. Mr. Yarbrough, Gene Rogers' daddy was A.B. Rogers that started the
Ocarina.
Ocarina.
Yeah.
Well, they had a movie company that was going to come in, and they wanted to take pictures of us, and we couldn't get out of school. He wouldn't let us out, so we went anyway. And I don't remember what happened, but it was bad. Not only did it happen at school, but it happened at home.
Well,
And Mother said, "Did they say you could go?" No, but you know, it was the only time they were going to be in town, and so we wanted to be in the movies, of course. But that never happened again. I don't know if it came up or not, because we wouldn't do anything, and they didn't spank.
No.
They just had to look at
Mr.
you.
Yard, the principal just had his look, didn't he?
While we were having lunch before this session today, we were talking about our teachers, and one of our teachers was a lady named Allie Pearl Howell,
Oh, yes.
and she was the flunking teacher.
Miss Howell.
And she had the insight. She taught third grade, and she had the insight to see a child that would do better if they were in the class behind, next class. And we had some very notable classmates that were held back and ended up in our class. One of them became a 3-star admiral. Another became a principal of a high school. And then another that was in our class and held back and ended up in the last class was a much decorated war veteran. He was a Marine, recon Marine that was killed in Vietnam. And
Do you remember his name?
yeah, his name was Henry Barber, Buzzy Barber, we
Buzzy.
called him. And Admiral was Jimmy Pappas, and the superintendent of schools was Randall Dry, or principal of school, I'm sorry. And but anyway, we had some great teachers, and she was, you know, looking back, she was really one of the best because she held those students back.
Do you remember the English typing teacher? We got to be
Yeah.
seniors, and there were 5 of us who never had typing.
Yeah, let's see.
We didn't
Mr.
have to-
Parker?
Parker.
Yeah, this is
William
nice.
Parker.
So he
Right.
came to us and said, "You need to have typing."
Right.
And I remember it was Jack Rody,
Mhm.
who's now a very good lawyer.
Yeah, down in the Houston area.
Yeah. And so he'd come and check on us periodically, and so we kind of self-taught typing and give us tests, those typing tests. Because he said, we're going to need them when we go to high school,
I mean,
And-
college.
college.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we sure did.
And that's right.
Did you all 3 go on to college
Oh yeah,
here in town?
yeah. Well, I did. Yeah, and
I did.
Linda did.
No, I started in the business world, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, once you start making that money, it's hard.
Well,
to
that's right.
think. And a number of professions. I started out with the accounting department at the state bank and worked up to teller. Then moved on to Lincoln Mercury dealership, title processing, accounting, and then good old insurance industry. And I was managing partner for Ramsey Insurance, which is Heights County's oldest insurance agency, 1898.
It's kind of
Yeah.
groundbreaking for a woman to do all the
Yes.
things you
Oh,
did,
yeah,
right?
She
Well,
was a
and-
star, rising
You were
star.
one of the first in your field in this
Yeah.
town, right?
Yeah.
And we decided then to, Charles and Jeanette and I decided to sell the agency at the end of 2000, and Benchmark Insurance purchased our book of business, and I went with the book of business because we had had those customers for so many years. We didn't want them to feel like we had just dumped them, and so they still saw a familiar face. I was going to stay about 6 months, and about 11 years later, I retired from the commercial lines customer service at Benchmark. It was wonderful, wonderful ride.
Now Tommy became a professor at a university.
Oh.
One day, and I asked him, I said, how can you teach all that and spell? Because I couldn't spell. And I thought none of us could spell. And he said, well, I just learned to spell. But he was a professor.
Well, I wasn't at a university. I was an instructor at McClellan Community College. Ended my career in journalism teaching it.
So you moved away from San Marcos for your
Yeah.
adult life, and you two ladies stayed here for your.
Well, I stayed here till I was 40 years old. I was editor of the San Marcos Record for 15 years. And we sold the paper. It had been in our family for 53 years. And my granddad and a partner bought the record in 1921. And they published the first issue when they were owners on April Fool's Day, 1921. When my dad moved here, my dad was a futurist. He always liked new gadgets, and when he moved to San Marcos in 1921, he was 15 years old. And he told me that the first day that they moved into the house they were renting here in San Marcos, he went outside and looked up and down the block, and there was a pole sticking up on top of one of the houses, and he wondered what that was. So he went down there and looked at it, and there was a guy that about a year or two older than he was that lived there, and found out that there was a radio antenna. And he said at that time there was 3 radios in San Marcos, and they were all built by, you couldn't buy one in a store. You could buy a kit and make one. And so he started doing that, and when television came along, he was the first person in our neighborhood to buy a television set, and all the neighbors would come over to watch the big boxing matches and stuff like that. But we were the next door neighbors. Dad built our home for $6,000 in 1929
On Veramendi?
on Veramendi
And
Street.
his name was Addison?
Yeah, well, I'm the third. He went by his middle name, Thomas Addison Buckner, and everybody called him Addison. Called my granddad T.A., and I'm Tom. And but anyway, he told me that if he'd waited a year, the Great Depression hit, he could have had that house built for $3,000 instead of $6,000.
And my daddy built our house.
And the next door neighbor were the Edwin and Alberta Smiths.
Yes.
And they lived next door to each other till they all died. Well over 50 years, I guess. And they're buried up in a cemetery next to each other.
Wow.
Interesting.
So
And you you lived on Harvey Street the whole time? Your dad built that house on Harvey
He
Street?
built the house on Harvey.
how much did he build it for?
No, I don't know. He got the lumber, I'm sure, wholesale, because he was in the lumber business. But the house has beautiful, beautiful hardwood floors.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
And I have no hardwood floors in my house.
Which house is it on Harvey Street?
400 Harvey. It's now a mortgage company.
South Star Mortgage, right there where
Next door
Harvey
to
and
the
San
Braden.
Antonio.
Yeah, split.
Huh?
San Antonio Street curves.
Yeah.
Harvey Street continues.
Oh.
They're the first house on
Next
Harvey.
to the Montessori
Yes, that's
school.
okay.
Yeah.
So
But
that's where you grew up, right there.
And I had to wax those cotton picking floors, and had to mop them, had to clean them, had to wax them, and then polish them, all on my hands and knees. And I said I would never have hardwood floors in my house, and I don't. And I have regretted it a bit.
So you went to college at the university here.
I did.
And where did you meet your husband?
I met him here at church.
Ah.
He was everyone thinks that he was one of the local Gilcreases, but he was not. He came here from Woodsboro on a basketball scholarship. So, and I met him at church,
Which church?
the University Church of Christ. It was downtown.
Yeah.
And He and two others would come to church on Sunday morning.
And you lived here all the.
Uh-huh.
And where'd you meet your husband, Nancy?
Here, he was at Gary in the 50s, and also weekend jobs at the service stations, and we all by then had cars and had to go to the service station, you know. And we have lived here. Our son graduated from San Marcos High School in 1972, I guess it was. And so, and he was born at the Hayes Memorial, Soldiers and Sailors, there on Belvin Street. And, you know, the thing I think that I just remember and just loved so much about the time we were growing up is that we had all that wonderful freedom that we could come and go, and it sound, you know, we knew what our limits were, and we respected that, and we just truly
We never had to lock our doors or leave.
That's
We
right.
could leave the keys in the car.
That's right.
Never, you know, it was a great time.
If I wanted to see what Daddy was doing or go see my dad, I'd leave my house and I'd walk through town over across the railroad tracks. William Cameron Company is now where there's a bank there.
Compass Bank.
Compass Bank. And when I get ready to go home, it'd be when the train was coming through, and I'd get out there and wave to the engineer, and sometimes they'd throw me a nickel. I was so excited.
Wow.
There was a free nickel.
Well, you never did tell us about that. We could have come down and waved at them too.
Well, I'd have to share my money.
Ah.
You know, there wasn't that much around. So.
One of the things I remember so vividly is the first time I came to San Marcos. My dad had business at the courthouse, and so he parked on the south side of the courthouse. And I looked up and I thought, oh, that is such an awesome building. And I just got so carried away with that. And then I looked up and there was Lady Justice. And I thought that was just the greatest thing I had ever seen.
Came to the big city from Kyle.
Yes, from Kyle Mountain City.
Well, another thing people have talked about is how everything that you did was in that downtown.
Right.
Your groceries, all your clothing. There were no other.
Cleaners,
That's right.
Yeah.
bakery. Tom's mother used to make the best cheese sandwiches, but she'd go to the bakery and they would slice the bread for her, thin, thin, so that she could roll those and toast them. Oh, they were so good.
Each of them had about 2,000 calories in it.
Probably, yeah.
What was the name of the bakery?
Simon's Bakery.
Simon's.
Simon's. There was two bakeries in town, that and Cooper's Bakery over. They bakery. If you came out their back door and went, we didn't have a back door at our newspaper, but it had a side door on the alley, and so Edwin Cooper, who was the big boy I was telling you about, he was a great. He took care of us little guys. But he's written a book that tells anybody interested in history of San Marcos should get that book. It's do you remember the name of that book? But anyway, he tells about growing up in he's one of the town boys downtown, you know, and it's a great book and tells a lot of history of San Marcos like we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And as I recall, that bakery was where Royal Cleaners is now.
Oh, is that where?
As,
Okay.
As I recall,
Should be.
it was.
Yeah.
And of course, the Palace Theater was right next to that.
Do you remember any big events that happened in your childhood or your youth in San Marcos? Like a politician coming to town, or a flood, or a fire, or something?
The river parade.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
John Wayne came to San Marcos when we were in high school. Remember that? And the band went down and played, and he signed the bass drum. But he was, I think he was politicking for somebody. Probably Lyndon Johnson. And when Lyndon was running for congressman, and of course Lyndon Johnson came to town all the time back when he was, you know. In fact, my mother was in college when he was. up here on the hill. She went just one year. She met my dad, and he's in. I've looked at her yearbook, and he's in the yearbook probably 20 or 30 times. He was really a big man on campus, But that was a big event.
Yeah.
Y'all think of some other ones?
The river parade.
The
Tell me
river.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
The walk. Yeah, that was more fun.
Yeah.
And we.
Well, and they filmed the getaway when we were. I guess we were
yeah,
older.
they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had the
On
water.
the courthouse
They had
and-
used to have the water pageant on the river. Remember that?
Yes.
Put on by the college students and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And that was.
That was like a parade, and they'd fix up rafts and stuff and float down the river, starting there at
All lighted
Sill
up.
Park, and I guess they went down to City Park, which is just down the stream from that.
Some of us got to be in it sometimes. Of course, that was a big deal.
We were all here when the Texas Water Safari started, and I was very active in that for several years. I was their public information guy for pro bono, and saw a lot of interesting things happen with that. And little personal note. One year we decided we'd have a festival at the end of when the safari was over, and invite contestants to come up and participate in this thing. We had different events, and one of them was the 1 mile swim from Sill Park down to Rio Vista. And so I decided I would enter that. And so the day of the race, we got down there. There must have been 50 guys standing there in waist deep water ready to swim, and so they fired the gun and we all took off, and they all just left me, and most of them pulled out of the river about 100 yards down the stream, but I kept going, and so I got down to Rio Vista, and there's a little bridge over to this little island in the middle of the river, and that was the finish line. And I looked back to see if anybody's behind me, and here came somebody behind me just swimming like crazy. And so I really dug in, and I was exhausted, but I beat that guy, and I got out just by a few seconds. And when he climbed out, I realized he just had one leg. So I was able to beat the handicapped swimmer that I don't see how in the world he went that fast, but he could go.
How about your final thoughts? Share with us your final thoughts about what it was like growing up in San Marcos back in that time.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Looking back, I wish my children, my sons, could have had the same freedoms that we had. I think that was probably the most important. And we didn't remember segregation.
Right. Yeah, that didn't. Yeah.
It was not a part of our lives. And so I think that's been hard for us to understand how some of the others are having such a hard time, and we don't understand.
Yeah, that's true.
But
Do you all remember? Another thing I remember is the day that the war was over.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh,
remember
yeah.
all the sirens? That's how you knew when there was something going on in San Marcos. Was the sirens.
were we in the sixth
sounding.
grade?
Neighbors were talking over the back fence and happy and rejoicing and
had a big parade. I was watching the movie in Palace Theater, and the film stopped, and Mr. Fox came out on the stage and said, "The war is over." And the people this was like, as I remember, early in the afternoon, wasn't it?
When we found
But
out.
yeah, that was a great time. You bet.